In every shadow a secret waits, in every trail something watches. Welcome to Eerie Trails, where every path leads to darkness, and no story is just a story. Turn down the lights, and open your mind if you dare. The house was older than most of the bones buried beneath Texas soil. It stood alone at the end of a dirt road just outside the forgotten town of Marfa, where the desert winds whispered things only the dead should hear. People didn't talk much about the house, mostly because the kind who knew its story were either too old to speak or too scared to remember. The thing about the house was, it didn't look haunted. Not in that cartoonish, cobwebbed way. It had white siding that peeled like dry skin, a rusted metal roof that shrieked whenever the wind ran its fingers across it, and windows that looked more like staring eyes than glass. Ben and Melissa Hayes weren't superstitious. City folk from Dallas, they wanted out of the chaos. The constant hum of traffic, the never-ending bills and plastic smiles. Ben had inherited the house from an uncle he barely remembered, and all it took was one glance at the land surrounding it, 22 acres of desert and brush, wild and dry and empty, for them to make up their minds. They packed up their lives and drove west, thinking they were chasing peace. Melissa was the first to notice the house's mood. She called it that, a mood. Sometimes it was quiet, still in a way that made you feel watched. Other times it groaned and popped like something alive, like the bones of the place were shifting. Ben laughed it off at first. Old wood, he'd say, that's all. You watch too many movies. But then the dream started. Melissa would wake up drenched in sweat, her nails clawing at the sheets, eyes wide and glassy like she wasn't all the way back. She said she saw someone standing at the foot of the bed. A woman in a long nightgown, face hidden by a curtain of wet black hair, just standing, swaying slightly like she was trying to decide whether to leave or climb into bed with them. Ben never saw her. He'd wait till Melissa screaming, see nothing, and hold her until she stopped shaking. They stopped talking about it during the day. Melissa started sleeping with the lights on, and Ben moved an old hunting knife from the garage into the knitstand drawer, not that he believed it would do anything against a ghost, but it made him feel better that it wasn't just Melissa. Strange things happened in the daylight, too. Doors that were shut would creak open just enough for you to notice. The old hallway light flickered even though they'd replaced the bulb 3 times. One morning Ben found every cabinet in the kitchen wide open, as if someone had stormed through the room in a silent rage. And always there was the sound. A soft thumping from the walls at night, like a hand beating slowly, rhythmically. From the inside, the townspeople weren't much help. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles down the road, a man named Harris who had eyes that didn't blink often enough. When Ben tried to bring it up casually, over beer and small talk, Harris just stared at him a long time before saying that house never wanted company. There was no history online, no news articles, no documented hauntings. Just rumors. Melissa found a thread on an old paranormal forum, dusty with inactivity, where someone claimed the house used to belong to a midwife in the 1920s. Said she went crazy after her husband died in the mines, lost her child to a fever, and eventually vanished, though some said she hanged herself in the attic. Melissa became obsessed. She stopped eating, stopped showering, spent hours clicking through dead links and archived newspaper scans. Ben tried to get her out. They took a weekend trip to El Paso, but Melissa was quiet the whole time, like the house had dug something into her and wouldn't let go. On the second night of their trip, she woke up and asked him, "Do you hear it?" Ben didn't, but she swore she could hear the thumping. Even 400 miles away, they returned. She didn't even unpack. That same night, Ben awoke to find Melissa standing at the top of the stairs, staring into the dark hallway. He called her name, but she didn't move. Just stood there, breathing shallow and fast, eyes locked on something he couldn't see. When he finally got up and touched her shoulder, she flinched like he'd slapped her and whispered, "She's in the walls." The next day, Ben climbed into the attic. It was cramped and hot, the kind of heat that felt wrong, like it came from something angry. He found nothing at first: dust, broken boxes, old Christmas decorations. But in the far corner, hidden beneath a loose board, was a trapdoor. A second crawl space. Inside it, he found bones. Human bones, small, child-sized, wrapped in a threadbare sheet stained with something brown and ancient. He didn't scream. He couldn't. His body froze and his breath caught in his throat, a cold sweat breaking over his skin even in that suffocating heat. He didn't call the police. Something in him said it wouldn't matter, that whatever had happened in that house had happened too long ago, and that digging it up wouldn't stop it. He reburied the bones out back under the twisted old pecan tree. That night, the house changed. The lights flickered constantly. The walls thumped louder, faster, more urgent. The air smelled like wet earth and rot. And Melissa didn't sleep. She just stared out the window, humming a lullaby Ben didn't recognize. When he asked her about it, she just smiled and said, "She sings it to the baby." Ben started seeing her too, the woman in the nightgown. In mirrors and corners, in the reflection of the TV when it was off. She was always just barely there, half in shadow, face always hidden. Once, he woke up to the feeling of fingers in his hair, cold and slow, combing through like a mother soothing her child. He told Melissa they had to leave, right now. She looked at him, eyes hollow, and said, "But we just got here." "And she likes?" She didn't wait. He packed a bag, grabbed Melissa by the arm, and dragged her to the truck. She screamed the whole way, not words, just raw, ragged noise, as if he were tearing something from her. The moment they hit the edge of the property, she went silent. Melissa never spoke again. The doctor said it was trauma. Stress-induced mutism, they called it. But Ben knew better. He knew she was still listening. They moved back to Dallas. She sits by the window most days, staring at nothing, still humming that lullaby. And sometimes at night, when the house is quiet and dark, Ben hears it too, the faint thumping from behind the drywall. He's never been back. But the house waits. And it remembers.